Welcome to Sober Talk. I'm Dennis and I have lived experience of alcohol. If you or anyone you know is struggling with alcohol, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 222222 or check out their website on aa.org.au. I'll just run through the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other. They must solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses or opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Denise. I'm an alcoholic. And grateful today to be sober, due to my higher power and the loving fellowship of AA. I'm in my 9th year of sobriety, and I suppose I was one of the lucky ones that I got it straight away, but that's because I was so desperate. I drank for 40 years or more, and that in the end I was a daily drinker, hiding glasses in cupboards and trying to do my best with life, but I couldn't do anything in life without a drink in my hand. The only time I was sober was when I gave birth to my 2 children, whether I was sick or had to go into hospital or whatever. I had to have my medicine, as I used to call it back then. So what it was like, I grew up in an alcoholic family. My generations of alcoholics. I've got Irish grandparent alcoholics on my mother's side. And I'm not sure my father's side, but he was the alcoholic, and he was a nasty alcoholic, and drink used to change him, and he was terrible with my mother, so it was a very dysfunctional family, lots of domestic violence. I was the only one that would stand up to him, and that, of course, didn't make me popular. And I thought, because I didn't drink like my father, that I was an alcoholic. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I figured that it was just because I had such a dysfunctional childhood that I needed stuff like that to get through the day, because I was always anxious or depressed. Some of the stages in my life went through lots of depression. I suppose now looking back, that was grief. Grief not practiced or not sorted through. And because when I was growing up, it was all about the alcoholic. I've done a little bit of Al-Anon since, and yes, it really wasn't about the other people in the family. No one was allowed feelings. Nobody was allowed to talk about it. It was all pushed under the carpet, and neighbours weren't supposed to know, but of course they did know because of all the shouting and the rows and the carry-on. And I can remember when we moved from Elizabeth to North Haven, I was a teenager by then, driving, and I challenged my father. He came home drunk one night and started to smash up the house. And I told him I wasn't going to put up with it. And he said, what are you going to do? And violently towards me. And I said, well, I'm going to call the cops. So I called the police and they came, and my mother was horrified. They talked to him and they told him I left. I told the police I was leaving because I could drive. I was driving off to family. And they said to him, you're going to let a young 15, 16-year-old leave the house and go out into the night? And he's like, yeah, I don't care, and that sort of thing. And afterwards, my mother was horrified that I'd called the police, and she said to me, I still remember it to this day, this is how unwell she was, what will the neighbours think? And I said, Mum, the neighbours know you're fighting and arguing every night. I was trying to get through my school leaving to get into matric, so I was studying, and it was just impossible. Everything was impossible. You just couldn't have, normal. The things that healthy people do just didn't happen in my household a lot of the time. But my mother did hold it together. We always ate well and that sort of thing. And on the surface, it all looked good. but that's what it looks like in an alcoholic's life. So I was a high achiever alcoholic, if there's such a thing. I had children, as I said before. I married a man from my area, and we got a business together, and we did exceptionally well. We were living the high life, so more opportunity to drink, of course, cars and houses and companies here and in Western Australia, and 2 children that I'm still really close to, thank goodness, today. And it just was all under the guise of this drinking business, and I didn't think anyone knew, but of course there would have been people that did know. He knew, and he was a drinker too, but his background was drugs. We grew up, both of us, in Elizabeth, and he got into the drugs. I didn't on that level. I touched on drugs, but he started to try heroin and was sharing needles back in the day when he got Hep C, and we weren't aware of that until he had to have a blood test for his insurance, because we were making so much money, we had to insure him for so much money. And they found he had Hep C, and that started my marriage decline because he was in fear, and he eventually, after 12 months of assimilating that, we got some help through the Hep C health people. He left me with the 2 kids, and later on died. 10 years later he died. Eventually he was like a vegetable. Unfortunately, my kids had to put him in a facility, and he was only 54. And so all that money and, didn't make him happy. But, he wasn't still using drugs, but that's the damage that it done in the past in his life, and it damaged his liver. And, so that I'm so grateful to be alive today because of all the people that I grew up with are nearly all gone, I think. I don't know any of them that are still alive. So I feel very, very grateful. And then the kids haven't got a father, of course, but they're married now with their own families and children. And I'm so close to my grandchildren. I took 4 years off of working, still voluntary working, but not working, so I could take time to go visit them whenever I needed to and support my children from having them as young babies brought home from the hospital, because I realised that that's a connection I wanted to make no matter what, and I have a really good connection with all my grandchildren today, and I wouldn't have had that if I was still drinking, and they wouldn't want me around and in their lives, and I wouldn't blame them. So all of my grandchildren have never seen me drinking, and I'm very proud of that fact, because I'm hoping that sets a precedent for my future generations in, alcohol and drugs and that sort of thing. And of course, even, I can't stop them from trying any of that stuff. But if there's alcoholics in there and drug addicts in there, I can at least tell them and guide them to, AA, and they can get well inside the rooms if they want to. I can show them that there's a way. In my generation, I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon, and it's a family disease. So, that's a really important thing, I believe, these days. It gives me a lot of hope for my grandchildren, that if they suffer, and I'm, as I said, I don't know what that is, whether you're born with it or I don't think any science even knows these days, but whatever it is, we've got it, and we know we've got it because we can't drink safely. And that's basically what it was. I'd have one drink, and then one drink would lead to another drink. And anyway, what happened was I got remarried again, and of course I married an alcoholic. This time I attracted the alcoholic into my life, as you do, but I didn't know he was alcoholic. We just drank a lot together, and obviously unhealthy drinking. and I sort of took a hostage, really. But he never admitted that he was alcoholic, like I didn't know. And I was living with him. The children had left home, and I went into deep depression. I wasn't working, and we'd gone to a seaside town to try to start a healthy lifestyle, and it wasn't working. And it got so bad I couldn't get out of bed, and I used to pray to a God that I didn't believe in, that I would just be taken, and it would I was physically really unwell. And one day, nothing happened. Surprisingly enough, no lightning bolt came to save me or group of angels or anything like that. So I had to do something about it. And one day I remember I rang Beyond Blue and said how depressed I was, and they asked me a few questions, and it came up that I was drinking. And it was the first time that I had been honest with myself or anybody about my drinking. And they said, well, look, we really need to address the drinking before we can help you with the mental health. And that was the beginning of my journey. And I went into a detox, DASA detox for 4 days or so. My husband drove me up there, and I told him while I was up there, get rid of all the alcohol in the house. So he did, and he moved it to the shed. But that was his drinking arena, and I got sober in there. They helped me with medicine and, a lot of love and a lot of support. And then I realised I needed to continue with that network. So I decided while I was in there that I'd be going to AA when I got home. AA came in to visit me in DASA, and there was this wonderful girl there full of life, and she was telling funny stories about her drinking and where it led her. And I realised I hadn't done anything crazy like that. So I figured if she could get well, there might be a chance for me. And they told me that there was a solution to my problem. So I believed them. I had no other evidence, and it's the first time I got hope. So when I got home, it was really difficult. I just stepped through it a day at a time, minute at a time, second at a time if I had to. And I started going to AA meetings. And my first meeting was in Goa. That was and still is my home group. And I remember ringing up and speaking to the secretary, who back then was Irish Martin, and I thought, great, they're all Irish. I've got that in my heritage. They'll understand. They'll teach me how to drink without it getting me into trouble. And how wrong was I? Of course, we didn't drink. And the first day I got there was a lot of love shown. Lots of people came up and was friendly. And I just felt like I belonged for the first time, well, in a long time, or if ever. And they told me to look for the similarities and not the differences. And that straight away was a really good thing for me, because it meant that I didn't judge people, because I could have been sitting there and it could have all been about them instead of myself, and it made me align myself with the things I could see in them. And I could see plenty of similarities, so I knew I was in the right place. And I bought the big book that night, and I took it home and I read it in the week, and I thought, wow, this will be my Bible, because even though I didn't understand it all, I knew that there was so much in there that was like me. And I finally started to get an inkling of what this disease was about, and realised that it was a disease that could be treated rather than some misfortune or, just some insanity. And my sanity started to return. And I always look at recovery as a holistic travel, whatever you want to call it. And that's what happened. Physically, I started to get well. People used to come up to me after meetings and say, wow, you're looking good. My skin was getting better. My eyes were starting to not be so bloodshot. And I thanked them for that, because I couldn't see that myself. I didn't have a mirror, and they were mirroring me. And I got better physically, and then mentally I started to get a lot more clarity. I still hadn't found the spiritual. In the beginning, my higher power was the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it still is in a lot of ways. I call it my clinic of calm. go to meetings. I'm a meetings person, face-to-face. I don't do many Zooms. They're there if I need them, but I prefer the face-to-face. It makes me be more accountable. You know, back in the day, we got told to do the dishes and, you know, those kinds of things. You can't do all of that on Zoom. And that kept me accountable. That kept me going to the meetings, and it made me have something to look forward to every Tuesday night. And then after I read the big book, I asked for a sponsor, and she came skipping over to me, and bless her heart, she was a beautiful sponsor, and she was exactly who I needed. So I worked the steps with her for 12 months, because 3 months into my sobriety, I started my own business from home, and people thought I was crazy. They didn't tell me, but they said behind my back, oh, she won't stay sober. This will be her undoing, and it wasn't. It's exactly what I needed to keep my sobriety going, and I had that business for 3 years until eventually I had to leave my husband because he was still drinking, and I had a do-or-die moment. The Serenity Prayer I used to say every day, and I had a do-or-die moment with the Serenity Prayer and realised that I had to have the courage to make the change, because I was frightened I might go back to drinking, or it really felt like the dark side, if that makes any sense to anybody out there. I was, you know, faced with this dilemma. And I didn't want to leave my husband, but I was in my 50s by then, late 50s, and I thought, oh no, here we go, second time around, what a mess. And I brought it up in a meeting at Strathalbyn, because my sponsor said, tell to get well. And I hadn't talked about all that, because don't forget, I'd been taught as a child not to talk about things. So I started to talk in this meeting, and, lots of people came up to me, and one woman in particular said, look, if you've got nowhere to go, you can tow your caravan onto my property. I'll just check with my husband. And that's exactly what I did. Members helped me hook the caravan on, and while he was at work, I packed it and took one dog and left the other, which broke my heart. All emotional stuff, always drama. And I moved to her property, but I could only stay there for 2 weeks, and then I started to couch surf. I hated to say that I was homeless. I said I was in transition. And I was in transition in more ways than one, and I stayed at my son's for a while in the city so I could do a meeting every day. And that's what I did, and I didn't drink through it. And eventually, 6 years down the track later, still living alone, still on my own, but, not in a dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship. And eventually, after, surfing the couches and stuff, one of the women in AA that I knew put her hand out and said that I could rent her granny flat. So I did that, and I started to heal, and I had 12 months there. Hang on, I just have to have a drink, sorry. I had 12 months with her, which was my healing while all my finances were being done. And then when my finances came through, I bought a little house in Victor Harbour where I am still today, and began the journey of living alone. And that wasn't easy either, because I hadn't been on my own for years. I had before I got married, but I hadn't for years. I'd had husbands, dogs, kids, the whole works. The house was always full, and I loved that. And all of a sudden I'm sitting here by myself looking at myself. Most people say that when they come to AA, they get in amongst the social, people. So they used to drink alone. I was different. I used to drink, I did drink alone, but I drank with a lot of people too. I had a lot of people in my life, and then I went to know people in my life, except for the people in AA. And then I hit a brick wall. I got sick at work. By then I was working again. I got sick, and I had to leave because they wouldn't give me time off. And I got physically sick, but then very quickly I got mentally sick. And I realised that underneath my drinking there was a lot of mental health issues that I'd never had time to examine before. And I used to go to meetings, and I used to fall asleep in the meetings because I wasn't sleeping at night and everything, and people just, sat by me and made sure I didn't fall off the chair, I suppose. So here I was, not even drinking, but feeling drunk, drunk on emotions. That's the problem. Like, I feel like of people I've talked to, I have a leaky adrenaline system, and if it starts to leak and I don't have a hold on that somehow, I'm in trouble. And that's what happened. I hit rock bottom again, and I thought, now what can I do? And the thing is there was a piece of missing in the jigsaw for me, and that was my emotional sobriety. People go poo-hoo it and say, emotional sobriety, what's that? Well, for me, it means that I can cope with things emotionally like a normal human being, whatever that is, healthy human being. And I didn't know how to do any of that, so I desperately needed that emotional sobriety. And drinking since I was 14 up till, 53, I think it was, when I came in the rooms, I was emotionally stunted, I can tell you, and in every shape and form, and I needed to address that. And I was lucky because one of the guys that was in AA had also been doing a program called Grow. I'd never heard of it. And he said to me, look, I need a lift to the meeting. Can you give me a lift? And I said, yeah, sure. So I gave him a lift, and he said, do you want to stay just to see what it's like? And I said, yeah, okay. Can't be in, I was feeling really bad. And so I started Grow, and it was like a repeat of AA, and they hugged me, and I cried for the first time. I can't remember how long, because all my emotions were bottled up, and I just let it all out. And they encompassed me, and back then it was a small group. Now we're up to about 17, I think, down in Victor. And I do that whenever I can on a Friday afternoon, and that's a 12-step program like AA, so I have 2 12-step programs in my life. And that helps me because I live alone, talk about my problems with other people and get feedback. It also gives me a practical program to do something about those problems, because I get a practical task if I have a problem around the program, and I take off and do that at my leisure, and that suits me, and report back to the group. And we also do a lot of social things. We have coffees and card nights and quizzes, and the same thing as AA, walks. And that fed my social life as well in my community. So I became connected to the community, which is what I needed to do. And as well as being plugged in with my higher power, I also needed to connect to my community, and I found that way. Started volunteering, as I said, for Lifeline, and I'm now the coordinator of the wildlife shop in Victor Harbour, which supports our local hospital, animal hospital in Goolwa, and I love that job, but I'm looking for paid work, so I've been doing it for 12 months, but now I'm ready to go back to work, so that will have to go on the back burner, but it's been a big part of my life. I'm organising a fashion show at the moment down here on the 29th of April for a charity event, and it's been great fun. I love fashion, and that's why I like working in a shop. But yes, I'll have another change soon coming, and I'm open to those changes now, and I'm capable of doing them. I have to beware any balance in my life. That's really important. Daily balance, and that gives me the serenity that I have today, the biggest gift that anyone could ask for. Yes, I have a roof over my head, and that I struggle, to keep that sometimes, financially living on my own. But I have it. I've opened it at times to other AA members that have needed help along the way, because I carry the message quite strongly. But at the end of the day, it's my serenity. I actually called it Blue Haven Cottage. And it's my serenity, and I have great serenity, more than I've ever had in my life. The only time I can ever remember having this amount of serenity was when I was with my grandmother. She offered me serenity, and of course I haven't had her for many, many years. So my higher power is different things to me. It works through people, works through the rooms. It works when I see a newcomer come in and get the message and get well. And it also works for me in nature. I'm a big nature lover, so, well, when I say big nature, it's not like I go doing docos or something, but I love walking along the beach down here. I like just being around trees and nature and gardens, and I feel very at home in those places. And it gives me the same effect as the rooms do. And I've got 2 chairs down here on my walk, one where I meditate and one where I pray. And it works for me. That it works. They told me, it works if you work it, and that's what I've done. And I've helped other people. I've been friends to other people in the program to get them through, to help them hold their hand through the steps, men and women. And it feels great. My higher power works through me, and I can almost feel their higher power when we're doing the steps together. And I don't know how that works. That's a miracle to me, but I sense it, and I know it's real. And, so I've had the opportunity to see quite a few people get sober. I've also seen a lot of people leave the rooms because, unfortunately for them, it's not their time or whatever it is. They don't get what some of us get. And that's okay. Everyone's journey is different. It used to upset me in the beginning, but someone told me once, there's a bridge. There's a bridge from when you're drunk to when you're sober, and you cross that bridge over. And once you've crossed that bridge over, you can see the other people on the other side, but you can't reach them. So there's no point in even trying. It's up to them to cross the bridge.
We have local meetings for the full week in the local area. Monday's Gala meeting at 8 o'clock. Tuesday is Elizabeth East at 8 o'clock. Wednesday is Elizabeth East at 8 o'clock. Thursday is Two Wells at 8 o'clock. And Friday is Salisbury at 8 o'clock. There's a meeting at Deveron Park at 12 o'clock, and on Sunday there's a meeting in Salisbury at 7 o'clock, and many other meetings in the area. For details of your local meetings, please phone 1300 22 22 22. And once again, if anyone you know is struggling with alcohol issues, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 22 22 22. The website is aaSouthAustralia.org.au.